The emergency klaxons screamed through the corridors of Station Pyrrhus 7, their wailing pitch designed to penetrate even the thickest skull plating of the galaxy's most armored species. Rylan pressed himself against the bulkhead as a plasma conduit exploded 3 meters to his left, showering the passageway with molten droplets that sizzled against his environmental suit. "All personnel, evacuate to emergency pods," the station's AI announced with mechanical calm that contradicted the chaos erupting throughout the facility. "Reactor breach imminent. 12 minutes to cascade failure," Rylan cursed under his breath. 12 minutes. The nearest pod bay was 15 minutes away at a dead sprint, and he'd seen what happened when stations went critical. The Vryn incident had left a debris field that stretched across half a solar system. He wasn't about to become another statistic in humanity's expansion into the stars. He rounded the corner toward the central hub when he heard it, a sound that cut through the alarms like a blade through silk. A cry. High-pitched, terrified, utterly primal. The kind of sound that transcended species and spoke directly to something ancient buried in the human brainstem. Rylan's feet stopped moving before his brain caught up with the decision. "No," he told himself firmly. "You have 11 minutes. Maybe less." The cry came again, weaker this time, fading. "Damn it." He reversed course, sprinting toward the sound. The research wing. Of course it would be the research wing, the farthest section from any escape route, where Station Pyrrhus 7 scientists studied the most dangerous specimens in the sector. The door had buckled inward from some internal explosion, leaving a gap just wide enough for a human to squeeze through. Inside, the laboratory was a scene of devastation. Containment chambers lay shattered, their reinforced glass scattered like crystalline snow across the floor. Chemical fires burned in rainbow colors as exotic compounds reacted with oxygen. And there, in the center of the wreckage, trapped beneath a collapsed support beam, was Sira. Rylan had seen the Dragon Child before, of course. Everyone on the station knew about her. The Draconics were one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species, and Sira was the daughter of High Flame Kesrith, the regional governor. She'd been brought to Pyrrhus 7 for cultural exchange, which everyone understood meant hostage to ensure good behavior. She was small for her kind, perhaps only 3 meters from snout to tail, with scales that shifted from deep crimson to gold depending on the light. Those scales were cracked now, leaking the luminescent blood that fueled her species' legendary fire breath. One wing lay at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Her eyes vast and golden and filled with an intelligence that put most galactic species to shame, locked onto Rylan with desperate hope. "Human," she wheezed, her voice carrying harmonics that human ears weren't designed to process. "Please, I cannot." The beam. Rylan crossed the distance in 3 strides, his boots crunching on broken glass. Up close, he could see that the support beam had pinned both her legs and her tail. Worse, a jagged piece of metal had pierced her side, and the glow from her blood was getting brighter, a dangerous sign. The Draconics biology lectures came flooding back to him. When their blood burned hot enough, it ignited. "Station breach in 9 minutes, the AI reminded him helpfully. "I'm going to lift the beam," Rylan said, positioning himself at what looked like the balance point. "When I do, you need to pull yourself free. Can you do that?" Sira's head bobbed once, a gesture of assent that was universal across 100 worlds. Rylan set his feet, wrapped his hands around the beam, and pulled. Nothing. The beam might as well have been welded to the floor. He adjusted his grip, engaged his suit's servo assists, and tried again. The beam shifted a centimeter. Maybe 2. "It's not enough," Sira whispered, and Rylan heard something break in her voice that had nothing to do with physical pain. Despair. The realization of death. He'd heard that sound before. On Kepler 442b, when the colony domes had failed. In the asteroid mines of the belt. When the oxygen had run out. Humans knew that sound intimately. It was the sound they'd been making since they first learned to contemplate their own mortality in caves on ancient Earth. And humans had learned to respond to it with one simple philosophy. "Not today. Listen to me," Rylan said, his voice taking on the tone he'd used in the Marines. The voice that could cut through artillery fire and make men charge into hell itself. You're going to live. I'm going to get you out. But I need you to trust me." He released the beam and moved to Syrah's head. Before the dragon child could protest, Ryland slipped his arms beneath her body, feeling the heat of her blood through his gloves. It was like holding a fusion reactor. His suit's temperature warnings began to scream. "What are you?" Syrah began. Ryland lifted. Later, the station's surviving scientists would debate what happened next. Some would claim that Ryland's adrenaline triggered a genetic modification left over from humanity's military gene wars. Others would insist it was the servo assists in his suit, pushed beyond their safety limits. A few would whisper about older explanations about the fire that humanity had stolen from the gods in ancient myths, about the spark that had let one species of ape conquer an entire world. What everyone agreed on was this. As Ryland lifted the dragon child, flames erupted along his arms. Not metaphorical flames, not the glow of superheated metal or the shimmer of energy fields, real fire, burning with an intensity that matched Syrah's own blood heat, wrapping around Ryland's forearms like living serpents. The flames didn't burn him. Instead, they seemed to flow into his muscles, through his muscles, granting strength that no human should possess. The support beam groaned, shifted, rose. "Move!" Ryland roared, and Syrah pulled herself free with her good wing, dragging her broken body across the glass-strewn floor. The beam crashed down the moment she cleared it, and Ryland stumbled backward, the flames around his arms guttering and dying. His suit's internal diagnostics were going insane, reporting temperature readings that should have cooked him alive. He stared at his hands, watching the last wisps of fire fade like morning mist. "Impossible," Syrah breathed, her golden eyes wider than Ryland had thought possible. "The flame. You carried the flame. Cascade failure in 6 minutes, the AI announced. Ryland shook off his shock and scooped Syrah into his arms again. She was lighter than he expected, hollow bones, like Earth's ancient birds. The dragon child didn't protest, simply curled against his chest as he ran. The journey to the escape pods was a blur of collapsing corridors and exploding conduits. Twice, Ryland had to shield Syrah from falling debris with his own body. Once, he had to jump a gap that had opened in the station's superstructure, praying that the artificial gravity would hold long enough for him to make the leap. They reached Pod Bay 7 with 90 seconds to spare. Ryland sealed them both into the pod and hit the emergency launch. The acceleration crushed them both into the crash webbing as the pod rocketed away from Station Pyrrhus 7. Through the viewport, Ryland watched the research station tear itself apart in a series of explosions that lit up the darkness like a newborn star. In his arms, Syrah was breathing steadily now, her scales beginning to repair themselves with the regenerative power that made the Draconics so feared across the galaxy. She looked up at Ryland with those ancient eyes. "My people have a legend," she said softly, "about a race that stole fire from the universe itself. We thought it was a myth." Ryland looked at his hands again, at the faint scorch marks that were already fading. "So did we," he admitted. Syrah's head settled against his chest, and for the first time since the alarms had begun, she seemed at peace. "Thank you, Flame-bearer. My father will wish to meet the human who carries our sacred fire." Ryland closed his eyes and let out a long breath. He had a feeling that his quiet life as a station technician was about to get a lot more complicated. But as he felt the steady rhythm of Syrah's breathing, and remembered the moment when impossible fire had answered his need, when human determination had bent the laws of physics themselves, he found he didn't mind. After all, impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. And humanity had been achieving the impossible since the first primate looked at the stars and wondered what it would take to reach them.